G'day, I'm Sean and welcome to the CarExpert Podcast. Now, just to get it out of the way early, we are recording this on a Friday because today, the day the podcast comes out, or if you listen to it on the Monday, it is King Charles's birthday and we're all taking the day off. So happy birthday, Charlie.
It's not actually his birthday, though.
Well, it's the day we're choosing.
It's the day we celebrate it.
So to help us celebrate Charlie's birthday, we've got Scott and James here. How you doing, guys?
Yeah, good. I'm presumably eating a royal birthday cake at this point.
I'm sure you are.
I'm actually at the football, but yeah.
James, are you at the football?
No.
No.
I'm having tea.
Two scams. Yes, very good.
Yes.
Well, to celebrate Charlie's birthday, we're going to talk about some of our favourite cars that the Royals have owned throughout the years. We're also going to talk about why Toyota are switching to hybrid only on a lot of their cars, but we're kicking off with VFACTS. It's that time of the month again. So, signs of slowing down? Nope. Signs of another million car year? Yep, because we're up to 111,000 deliveries for May, which is a crazy number, which is up. It was 92,000 in April. So, I mean, is this just supply coming in? Is that really what it is?
Is there a camera I can look directly down to make an apology?
That one, I think.
If Sportsbet offers markets on when the car market will slow down and you've been betting using my advice, I'm sorry. I've been saying since the start of the year it will, and it hasn't. Yeah, look, everything we're hearing from the industry is the same as we've been hearing all year, and that's that demand is slowing down, forward orders are slowing down, and this is, I suppose, a reference to historical supply. But at some point that has to end, and it's not. So this is the first month where I'm going to come out and say, hey, the good times are going to keep rolling.
Yes. So on that bombshell where Scott has announced that he's wrong, let's dive into some of the details. Toyota's still number one, unsurprisingly, 23,000 vehicles delivered. Ford, so the race for second is tight because Ford, Mazda, and Kia are all within about 1,200 cars of each other delivered for the month. Ford delivered 8,800, mostly probably Rangers and Everest.
More than half are Rangers,
probably two Pumas. Mazda 8,002, Kia 7,500, which is they're coming up clearly because they've got a bunch of new models coming. They've got the EV5 is coming soon, the little electric car.
Yeah, the new Carnival's just come on stream for them as well, which did close to 1,000 units for the month.
Yeah, so we could well see Kia jump up a bit further, couldn't we? So, all right, let's break it down. Models. James, run us through some of the high-performing models.
You're calling James a model?
Yeah, well, have you seen the hair?
So top for the month was the Ford Ranger, which was returned 5,912 registrations, so well over half of Ford's monthly volume.
3/4 just about.
Yeah, the Toyota Hilux wasn't far behind with 5,702. The Toyota RAV4 was third with 5,517. So pretty tight contention for the top three. They're all in the high 5,000 bracket. Next was the Isuzu D-Max with 2,612 units, the Mitsubishi Outlander with 2,500, then the Toyota Camry with 2,468, the Toyota Corolla with 2,439. So it's a very Toyota month. And also a very Ford month because the Everest followed up that with 2,110 units, which is huge. The Everest is doing really big volume these days. I think in the last maybe 6 to 12 months, we've just seen a massive surge in their delivery. So I don't know whether it's a mixture of high demand for the V6 or whether supply is just coming online for them. Mazda CX-5 still going strong with 2,108 units for the month. Tesla Model 3, 1,958, quite a bit ahead of the Model Y, which is a bit interesting. The Hyundai Kona's up there with 1,842 deliveries. MG ZS with 1,841, so just one behind. Kia Sportage strong with 1,790. Isuzu MU-X 1,789. Tesla Model Y 1,609, which is about less than half of what its usual volume is.
Yes, they've plummeted. Tesla have really dropped out of the bottom of the top 10. They're being 10th most popular car for the month. But I mean, what's happened to Tesla? Why have they plummeted so much?
So there's been some coverage in the, I was going to say mainstream media. That sounds like we're on Joe Rogan. In the broader non-car media about Tesla recently. It's got a lot of cars arriving in Australia, and it's probably the first time since the Model 3 and the Model Y arrived down under that they've not sold every car they're bringing into the country. We've seen really big price drops. So the Model Y is now about 10 grand cheaper than if you bought one in March, even though it's the same car.
Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, exactly. If you just bought one, depreciation's
it's bad.
To swear
bad, yeah.
I think the other thing is there's more competition. And we've been saying this for a little while now, but there's been some really significant price cuts on other electric cars as well, which means that if you like French cars, you can get a Peugeot E2008 for 15 grand less than the Model Y. You can get a BYD Atto 3 or even a plug-in hybrid C-Line for similar money to the Model Y. And then there's Hyundai models that are now cheaper than they were, Kia EV6, Competition is really heating up in that space, and people all of a sudden realize that there are options out there from brands that they've had before that aren't necessarily a Tesla. It is also worth noting that for all we know, Tesla could cut another $5,000 from the prices tomorrow and storm home in this financial year. Their deliveries do tend towards the back end of a quarter. They like to deliver in the last month. So this is probably one to watch over the next month or so. And when we sit here and talk end of financial year results, maybe the situation will be different.
Yeah.
Well, they've got the cars sitting on the docks, and they're still reporting their numbers to the
Yeah,
SCI.
I think they're reporting their numbers to the end of this financial year, and then they'll be done. So after June 30, we may not really be able to track it as well. I also wouldn't be surprised off Scott's comments about the price cuts. The cars that we're seeing that are on the docks that aren't going anywhere are perhaps cancelled orders that may have been coming in, and then they made the price cuts, and then people decided to cancel and try to get cash in on a new price and get $5,000 off. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next month. After Tesla Model Y was the Kia Sorento with just over 1,500, Toyota Land Cruiser Wagon with 1,482, Hyundai Tucson with 1,434, Mitsubishi Triton with 1,405, and Mazda BT50 with 1,383. Okay, I'm done with you. I think that's the top 20.
That's top 20. And 20 sounds like a lot, but there are hundreds of models, so it doesn't really even scratch the surface of it. One thing that you that you pointed out there, Camry, 2,500 odd deliveries. You can't even buy that car at the moment.
Toyota's been going through a process where the new Camry is coming later this year, and they've had a really long wait list for the current model. They're trying to convert people essentially. So if you are waiting for a current one, we'll put you on the new waiting list. You might have to pay some more for it, but it's a better, newer car. But there are plenty of people out there, and they're probably Uber and taxi drivers, at risk of being unkind, who want their hybrid sedan now. So Toyota is finally in the process, it looks like, of clearing the backlog of old Camry orders and finally getting ready to roll the new one out. Don't be surprised to see a glut of fresh-looking white Camrys on the streets and in your Uber apps soon.
Yes, and I have to say, I mean, I don't know how different the American Camry will be to the Australian Camry, but I've seen the American Camry as like the pace car in NASCAR, and it looks epic. So, yeah, can't wait for that one to come. Land Cruiser, I mean, we'll stick on Toyota for a second. Land Cruiser Wagon, about 1,500 deliveries. I mean, like that outsold Tucson, Triton, and BT50. That is not a cheap car. Like, where does that come from?
I think it's probably worth looking at the other cars on that list more than it is the Land Cruiser. The Tucson is in the process of being run out. So there's a new one arriving in the next couple of months. There's usually a gap in between. Triton and BT50 are harder to comment on. There have been some changes at the Isuzu factory in Thailand where they build the BT50. It wouldn't surprise me if that's more down to supply and the changeover from the old D-Max to the new one, which is a twin to the BT50, than it is to actual demand on those cars. So huge month for the Land Cruiser, but it's often around 1,000 units. I think it's more down to those other three cars.
Now, James, we were discussing this in the office the other day. Ram only delivered about 200 cars this month. A year ago, we were talking about how they were delivering over 1,000 a month. Now, where do you think this, I guess, absolute head dive off a cliff has come from? Do you think there's no instant asset write-off? Do you think there's delivery issues? Do you think it's the new V6 that's coming? What do you think is causing it?
I wouldn't be surprised if the instant asset write-off going offline is a big part of that, because I think we saw the surge after that scheme came into effect. So I think there was a period where people were like, oh, I can, get this for much cheaper, I can write it off on tax and things like that. And obviously at the time, I think fuel prices were maybe a little bit better. It made sense to buy one. Whereas now, everyone's talking about cost of living pressures. A vehicle like that is not cheap to run. And on top of that, if there's no major tax breaks, and now all the tax breaks are favouring, electrified, plug-in and electric vehicles, I think that's where people are starting to focus that spending on if they're looking into buying a vehicle for work. And yeah, I think that's really the crux of it. Because, you look at what people were buying, these are $100,000 and something vehicles. So they're not cheap to begin with. And if you're then spending exorbitant amounts fueling it every week or every half week, that's probably not going to be sustainable either.
I mean, it's an interesting thing because Ford, you would have thought Ford bringing the F-150 here could have done some great sales numbers, given it's one of the most popular vehicles in the world based on America numbers, America World Series. But it hasn't even managed to break into the top three. I mean, just looking, we've got a very big list here of all our popular contenders, and I've absolutely lost it now.
It would also help if Ford actually had it work.
Yeah,
and
well,
just stopped taking it off sale, because they've had about 3 major recalls that have caused stop sales. So that probably doesn't help either.
I think the other thing with the F-150 is the F-150 is to America what the Commodore and the Falcon were to Australia. You used to be able to get a Commodore with everything from tiny steel wheels, LPG tank in the boot, ready to go as an absolute taxi beater, all the way through to a fully, crazy supercharged SS with a Walkinshaw package and that sort of thing. And there was a lot of models in between it. There was really a Commodore for everyone. The F-150 in Australia is 2 variants, each of which is available in a short or a long bed. In the States, you can get them with what essentially look like wheels straight, ready to go to the airport to run around on the ground doing tarmac stuff.
Sort of thing.
All the way through to the King Ranch, which is essentially a Rolls-Royce with a tray on the back, in truck terms anyway. So the volumes they're playing with in Australia are much smaller because we're a smaller market, but also that's what the Ranger is here. The Ranger does the role the F-150 does in the States for Ford. This is never going to be a big volume car for them here, although they probably want to sell more than they have done because they haven't been able to sell them. I think for Ford, the F-150 is going to remain a more niche option that's going to make them more money because it gives someone who's had a Ranger Wildtrak somewhere to go.
Now, I do want to shout out quickly Jordan and Will, who put together these VFACTS articles every month on our website. There's a link in the description to check it out. They do a phenomenal job with the tables, the numbers, making sense of I couldn't make sense of the spreadsheet that we're sent by the CAI. They do a brilliant job. There is one really interesting one that I found on there. It's called sales by fuel propulsion type.
Yes.
Now, it's how many sales by petrol, diesel, hybrid, electric, and plug-in hybrid. The thing I found most fascinating is petrol sales are down, diesel sales are slightly up, but hybrid sales are up by 113.4%. Now, is this Toyota getting stock in? Is this interest is suddenly through the roof in hybrids? People are trying to go green. Where do you guys think that's come from?
Bit of both, I would say. If you look at Toyota, it has said for a long time this is going to be the year of the hybrid. It's going to have a lot of stock of the RAV4, the Camry, the stuff that it hasn't been able to sell. But looking at the rivals as well, if we talk a Corolla Cross, for example, you can now get a Hyundai Kona hybrid as well, which is similarly priced, really well equipped, really nice to drive. Kia's got a Niro hybrid, and as you move through the different segments, the number of options with hybrid power have grown really significantly. So Toyota is a huge driver of that. It's the biggest brand in the market, and it is the hybrid brand. But if you look at all of the all of the smaller brands around it, they all have incremental hybrid volume that's only going to continue growing as well. And as Toyota maybe stops getting as many cars into the country, there's going to be other brands ready to pick that mantle up and take some of that demand away.
What about you, James? Where do you think that's coming from? Is it same as Scott, or you got another opinion?
Yeah, I think part of it is the fact that Toyota is getting improved supply. And you look at like RAV4's deliveries have increased quite a bit now, and the majority of them are quite well known to be hybrid sales. And like Scott said, a lot of the other mainstream manufacturers are now coming online with better volume. Hyundai is a really good example where, unlike Kia, it's not as supply constrained with its electrified models. The Kona is making up a very big amount of overall Kona sales in terms of hybrid. They're expecting the same with Santa Fe, and they're just going to increase that with the Tucson that comes later this year. Kia's managed to get 300-ish units a month of the new Sportage hybrid, and they're, as far as we know, selling every single one they can get. So in a few months, that's already $1,000 or so, or $2,000 of new vehicles that are on the roads. And then, as Scott said, there's plenty of other options on the market that people are just willing to buy because people have wanted hybrids for a really long time. They just haven't been able to get them. So now they're being afforded the choice to get them in their driveways.
All right. Well, what caught your eye this month, guys? What was the thing that jumped out and surprised you?
I've got two.
Okay.
The first is the Kia Carnival with 925 sales. It's not a surprise. It's the best-selling people mover in Australia, but that is such a big number for a segment that so many other brands have declared dead. It's a really good car, the Carnival, and it shows that if you get the right product in the right space, people will buy them. The other is that Hyundai Kona, like James said before. The MG ZS has dominated that segment for a long time. The fact that Kona outsold it despite being a newer, more expensive product, it's not just shifting on price, is really impressive and shows that, again, good products at the right prices with hybrid options really have a space in the Aussie market.
James?
Well, there's obviously a lot to dive through, and I'm sort of just refreshing my memory now. Something that I went into a little bit of detail with the other day was this split between different fuel types that we were just talking about. So there was quite a lot of coverage around EV sales tanking last month because there was a drop, but then they were slightly up again this past month. And then when you actually sort of add them all together and see how much electrified vehicles are now penetrating the market, it's at some like 25% or something like that. So 1 in 4-ish vehicle sales now are either hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or electric, which is a really big move compared to even just last year or the year before. And the fact that, electric sales are still making up, 7 to 8%, which again is quite a bit up on what we were talking about even 12 months ago. So it's clear that even though Australians have not had the best amount of choice relative to other regions in the world up until recently, it shows that people are actually buying this stuff. So the more that brands can actually get on the train and do something about it, and we'll talk about Toyota in a sec, that people are actually going to buy it. So it's good to see that people are getting these cars in, and we're reducing fuel use and reducing emissions.
Absolutely, go. Happy polar bears, happy penguins, right? That's what we want. Well, it is end of financial year, and are you looking for a great deal on a brand new car?
Well, have I got a deal for you? Well, actually, I have a page full of them. All you need to do is go to Google, type in Help Me Car Expert, or use the QR code on the screen. It's going to take you to the CarExpert website. We're a big company. It's like over 60 full-time employees. Very impressive. We also have a page on the site with all of the deals going in Australia this month to help you figure out which car you need to pick. We can then even put you in touch with one of our friendly dealers who might even be able to get you a better deal as well. So go to Google, type in Help Me Car Expert, or whip your phone out, scan the QR code, and away you go.
Okay, time to talk about Toyota again.
More Toyota.
More Toyota. This seems to happen every year. Toyota just come up end of financial year, and that is what we talk about because it is the #1 selling vehicle in Australia and probably most of the world, to be fair. But if you want to buy a petrol Toyota, say you want a petrol Corolla or a petrol Camry, you're not going to be able to do that anymore, are you?
No. Sorry, I didn't pick up on your very subtle little throw to us there. That was lovely. No, so Toyota came out and held a press conference in line with the VFACTS figures that came out earlier in the week we're recording this.
Last week, but this week.
Last week, but today. But
yes.
And yeah, made the announcement that the Yaris and Yaris Cross, Corolla, Corolla Cross, Camry, RAV, Kluger, I think is the full list.
They're family cars, basically.
Anything that's not a rugged off-road or ute-based car is going to be available only with hybrid power. This is not a huge surprise. Their volume in like the RAV4, for example, has been very hybrid heavy. The new CHR is already hybrid only. But it is a move that I suppose signals just how much the market shifted. It was not long ago where Toyota offered a hybrid option in the Prius, and then it added a couple of hybrid options across a couple of its ranges, and it's now at the point where it can go on some of its biggest selling cars, but only giving you the hybrid. People are willing to pay more for it than they are the petrol. It's also something that we may see other brands eventually follow. I think the interesting thing is the why. We asked them, was this down to the new vehicle efficiency standard that is coming into Australia that's going to punish car makers for selling dirtier vehicles? Toyota said no, but I don't know that I believe it.
Okay, James, what's your take on the whole thing?
Well, I think it's come a little bit earlier than perhaps we were expecting. When I did the CHR launch, and that was one of the first of their Prius vehicles to go hybrid only, they also announced that the Yaris Cross, Corolla hatch, and there was one other car, I believe, that was going hybrid only with that announcement in about March, April. And when we asked about the rest of their range, they're like, oh yeah, it's a natural progression, but we'll get there. It now aligns Toyota Australia with a lot of other regional offices that they have in Europe in particular. Most of their passenger car or core model range is hybrid only. And it makes sense. Like it may not necessarily be directly NVES related, but a lot of brands are known to cut variants of their models once there's a very insignificant portion of those sales being done. And we're probably seeing now over 80% of a lot of these model lines will be hybrid sales. And if they can cancel the 20% that aren't really selling, but then get that back by having more hybrid production, then they're satisfying more people that are waiting in line for a hybrid one. And I think for the last maybe year or so, the petrols were sort of there if people didn't want to wait for a hybrid but still wanted that car, and then would end up maybe trading up to a hybrid anyway. So I don't think it's only going to do good for them. And then as NVS comes up, they're at least reducing their fleet emissions to a point where, things like the Prado and the Hilux, where they can't get an electrified version of that yet, they'll be able to offset that.
And I mean, look, it's no secret the Toyota hybrids drive a lot better than just the naturally aspirated petrols do. So not a huge surprise. One thing I'm curious about, are they going to reduce the entry-level prices down closer to what the standard petrol will be, or do you think prices are going to go?
Prices are not going to drop, is my prediction. Toyota has said people are willing to pay more for hybrid power. Why would they drop the prices? They cannot build enough RAV4 hybrids. Why the hell would you make it cheaper? I am disappointed, despite that fact, at a couple of Toyota's answers in this press conference. Prado hybrid, like you mentioned, it is actually available in the US. We don't get it in Australia. Toyota has said that it doesn't know that it could build the business case. They'd need to sell, call it 15,000 a year in Australia to justify building enough of those engines for us. It's shown through so many of its models that people want hybrids. Do you think it could sell 15,000 Prado hybrids a year?
I think there's plenty of people who don't need diesel who would happily take that 100%.
Yeah, I think that I was thinking about this before because I was reading the story that one of the guys did about this. And the difference with the Prado hybrid is I think people are under this impression that it's automatically going to be more efficient. And as Toyota's executive that was quoted in that article pointed out, the Prado hybrid is more of a performance-based hybrid. And I think we have to see it relative to the old Prado's V6 petrol engine as opposed to an alternative to the diesel, because the mild hybrid diesel now with an 8-speed auto and the 48-volt system will be more efficient than the existing one and will likely be more efficient than what the hybrid will be in the same conditions. You know, when you think about highway driving and stuff like that, I drove the Lexus RX with basically the same drivetrain and it was nowhere near as efficient as even 6-cylinder diesels from other luxury rivals. So I imagine in a much heavier car, put on a 3,000 kilogram caravan on the back, I don't think it's necessarily going to be better for fit for purpose than say the diesel is. So I think while I think it's a shame that Toyota has not been able to make the business case so far to bring that car here, I think customers or people that are perhaps seeing that announcement in a negative light maybe need to consider why or how that car would actually change their perception of what that car is.
I would ask you though, the only thing that Aussies like more than a hybrid at the moment is a performance car. We have always loved big V6 and V8 engines. Whenever a brand downsizes, be it Ford with the Ranger bi-turbo, Mercedes with the C63 plug-in hybrid, people complain. Surely Toyota can sell this as the next step in hybrid.
Potentially.
We've saved you fuel with it. Now we're going to get you where you want to go faster and you can have some fun with it. And Toyota has history with that. I think of the RAV4 200 kilo Wasps. I think of the Orion and the Hilux Sportivo way back in the day now.
The Supercharger 6?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a brand that has previously had performance credentials. It's now got the GR brand, and they are the only passenger cars that aren't going hybrid. The GR Yaris, GR Corolla, and there is one
GR86.
GR86,
and
GR
the Supra.
I was actually, sorry, I don't mean to move away.
No,
We'll come
okay.
back to what you say, but I was curious about that because World Rally is moving to hybrid systems. So, and obviously GR Yaris, GR Corolla, they're homologation cars. I'm surprised to hear that they're not going to go hybrid with them.
Yeah, I think on that front, the turbo 3-cylinder engine's got plenty of life left in it. They're going to put it in the Lexus LBX Morizo as well, or a version of it. I don't know that people want hybrids in those performance cars, and I would imagine it'd add a fair bit of cost to what is already a pretty expensive little car.
And weight.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to fit the battery in between the extra diffs they've given it.
And I don't know that BMW would be all that keen on Toyota going back with the Supra in the last year of its life, going, we need you to put an electric motor on this, and likewise the BRZ and the Supra, the BRZ and the 86.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Sorry, anyway, continue with what you were saying.
I think that Toyota is very good at thinking big when it wants to. The Prius is proof of that.
Yep.
It brought it in. It was a very forward-looking move, and it's turned hybrid into something that it might not have been in Australia without its influence. To then turn around and say Australians don't want this type of hybrid, I think is either deliberately or accidentally, I don't know which, but I suppose ignoring the market power it has, the marketing power it has as the sponsor of all of our big sports, and the ability it has to educate consumers on what hybrid tech and electric tech down the track can do.
I will counter that slightly with the fact that, you know, we just got the Prado pricing last week and that top spec Kakadu diesel is like 100 grand, right? If you add the hybrid system on top of that, you're now encroaching on GX territory, which is a twin turbo V6 and maybe another 10 grand on top of that. So if you want performance, you now have that V6. And I think Lexus is also looking in to bring the hybrid version of the GX in, which runs the same thing. So maybe perhaps price-wise and positioning, it works better for that car. So I think, you know, maybe with the volume argument and everything, they may not be able to justify it for the Prado, but they might be able to justify it for the Lexus.
Well, let us know, would you take a hybrid Prado? Would you like it with a petrol hybrid? Would you like it with a diesel hybrid? Or are you happy with just standard old 2.8 litres of old Hilux diesel in there? Leave a comment, let us know. Okay, it is time to celebrate our good King Charles's birthday, or Charlie as we like to call him here. We know you watch the podcast, Charlie, so happy birthday, mate.
I didn't know you were a royalist.
No, look, I'm not, but as long as we're part of the Commonwealth, we may as well celebrate this because it turns out the royal family are petrol heads.
Okay.
If you didn't know this already, they have quite the history of cars. Now, obviously, there's a lot of fancy cars, Rolls-Royce Phantom, Bentley State Limousine, Rolls-Royce Silver Wraith, DB6. That was one of Charlie's cars that he converted to run on cheese and wine.
Wait, sorry, what?
Yes, apparently it's not wine that you would drink.
I was going to say, it wasn't the DBX charcuterie. Like,
No, I assume it's mostly ethanol.
Okay,
blend.
okay.
And it's something, a component of cheese called whey, which, gin junkies take. Can also run your DB6.
because people in the north of America no, that's cheese curds, not whey.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of Little Miss Muppet.
Well, hopefully the TB6's emissions aren't like gym junkies after whey protein.
Yes, might just smell like a night out afterwards. He also had... Charles also had a Aston Martin Voyage Volante, a Jag XJS. Oh, sorry, Lady Di had a Jag XJSC, which is pretty cool, and a 500 SL. But they're not all £1 million sterling limousines. There's actually some other cool cars in there, such as Lizzie's favourite car, allegedly, was a Vauxhall Cresta. I'm going to read this out. PA Frary Estate that she customised with fishing rod holders, dog guards, and a gun rack.
What on earth is a Vauxhall Cresta PA Frary Estate?
Do you remember Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets and the Ford Anglia that they had in
Yeah,
Is
the
it based
flying
on
blue
that?
car.
It's not based on that because Vauxhall and Ford are obviously compared.
Yeah.
But it was that period and that style of car. So it looks kind of like an Anglia.
Like a shrunken American car almost. The sort of upright fenders.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, with
gotcha.
a gun rack on the back. So very American.
She was always a lady of the people.
Yes, she was. But so I'm curious.
Disagree so strongly. Okay. Yep.
I did task you guys with telling us what your favourite royal machine was. So I'll pass over to James first. What was your pick of the royals?
So it's one of the ones that you mentioned before. It's that Bentley State Limousine. So there's two of them currently in operation with the royal family. They're these armoured, like maroon burgundy, huge limousines that sort of look like a Bentley made love to a London taxi. They're absolutely massive. They're based on the old Arnage, which is like a 1990s super limousine that was probably loosely based on an old Phantom. One was a gift from Bentley themselves for Lizzie's Golden Jubilee back in 2002, and then I think they subsequently purchased a second one. And I just think they're really cool because you see there's a lot of photos of them doing like police escort processions through London and whatever, and they're in these big, massive cars, and they just have a real presence about them. And I like the bespokeness of it.
All right, Scott, what have you got?
I'm going a little left of field here. You always see on camera the Bentley that looks like a Bentley in a London taxi. You see the Queen waving out the back or the King waving out the back doing these ones with his sausage hands. What you don't often notice is the escort that goes with it. There is always an absolute cavalcade of British police cars. There's usually people on BMW motorbikes sort of flanking all four corners of the car. And then over the years, they've run everything from Vauxhall Corsas to Volvo V70s to some BMWs.
Those Volvo estates were cool.
The police cars that escort the royal sort of procession, often more interesting than the royal car itself. If we are talking royal cars, though, I do find interesting that, I was going to say Prince William, but it's Harry, has sort of lent on the German heritage in the British royal family and really likes Audis. RS6, e-tron GT, and more recently, I suppose, at his wedding, an electric E-Type, which is not German, but different story again.
German. But the RS6, I mean, that's cool.
It's an awesome car.
I'm pretty sure Harry used to fly helicopters in the army. So
He did, yeah.
It makes sense. But it was his mum that got him into that, as it turns out. Doing my research on this, Lady Di had an Audi 80 Cabriolet. That is very hard to say. So when she split from the royal family, she moved to the German side and got the four rings together, and there you go. So Audi's run in the blood on Lady Di's side, as it turns out.
Was she in a Mercedes limousine the night that she was unfortunately died in a car accident?
It was a Mercedes of sorts, I believe.
It was an S-Class.
Yeah.
Or they were chased by a Mercedes. There is a
Mercedes connection there in the night that...
If you know, leave a comment, let us know.
Yeah, this isn't going to turn into a conspiracy theories podcast.
Yes.
No, I don't actually believe that's what happened. But
well, look, there is one final interesting one that I found. Duke of Edinburgh, Philip, Lizzie's husband, was an avid lover of old Land Rover Defenders. Now, not a huge surprise, the Royals liked Land Rovers and Range Rovers, but he spent 16 years working with JLR, fixing up an old TD5 Defender ute. I don't think they call it a ute, but I'm calling it a ute for lack of a better term. He was a military man, so it's painted in like a bronze green military spec colour. And it was all done to carry his coffin to at his funeral. The funny thing was, JLR was so unsure about whether it would work, they built 3 of them just in case. Thankfully, it did work and it didn't break down, so that was all good. But yeah, I think that the Royals turns out massive car nuts. Some interesting cars in there, some unsurprising cars, but way more interesting than anything like the American presidents had, the Australian Prime Minister's ever had.
The Australian Prime Minister, it was a statesman and now it's a 7 Series.
I think it was
very
a priest,
boring,
it's a little bit fancier, but yes. But yeah, no, it's also funny when you start diving into this, how many other royal families around the world have such interesting car collections. We'll just skip over the Sultan of Brunei.
Yeah.
There's a follow-up I think there's a follow-up episode on the most interesting head of state cars. Because if we were to go to like Soviet era Russia, and then China similar and go further back again, there are some incredible vehicles that the general public could never dream of getting their hands on.
Well, would you like to hear us discuss more royal family cars? Because we could definitely do that deep dive. I think that'd be quite fun. One final shout out I want to give is to Princess Anne, who was a fan of Reliance. Not the Reliant Robin, as it turns out. It was a Reliant Scimitar GTE.
This is a running joke in the UK. Princess Anne had one of those. Yes. This is a thing a lot of people say.
Yes. Turns out that was a gift for her 20th birthday. It's a tragic looking car, but 70s were a different time, I suppose.
I suppose so.
And when you're the second tier royal, then I guess you get a Reliant. Not a Robin.
Robin probably too close to home is what they're doing to the people.
Ooh.
I don't actually think that. I just thought it was funny.
Yes. Yes, we'll gloss over that. All right, time for our picks of the week. To save Scott from the royal family's Assassin's Guard, we'll pass over to James. What's your pick this week, mate?
So Young Timers Garage, or YTG in Melbourne, always has a really interesting collection of exotic and luxury cars coming through their hands. And this week they posted a really cool set of social media posts and advertisements for 2 Dodge Vipers that they've just brought into their collection. And they did an Instagram reel that was sort of like, I think it was a Need for Speed or like a Gran Turismo themed thing where they had them 2 lined up, almost like they're on the turntables when you're selecting a car on the game screen. They have a blue and a black one, I think, and they were calling it the fastest hatchbacks ever because it was the GTSs that had the hard roofs and like the funky boots. And I haven't seen one of those cars in a very long time. So to see them come back and looking so fresh, the blue one especially, I love that color. So that was really cool to see.
They have the coolest engine ever put in a car. That 8.4 litre V10 is just unhinged.
Just a truck engine that they've just decided to put in a supercar. It's awesome.
Yes, and actually, Dodge put that in a Ram. They had the SRT 10 Ram that they had in the early 2000s. But the fun thing was the Vipers, you could get them in a manual transmission. So could you imagine trying to handle 8,400 cubic centimetres of V10 with a manual transmission?
You'd want to get your engine braking right, wouldn't you? There'd be some serious compression on that thing.
I imagine you go through some clutches with it too. Yes. All right, Scott, what's your pick this week?
I've got, I'm turning to Tony, I've got 2. The first is the concerned commenter who left a note on last week's podcast saying Scott looks straight up unwell. Thank you for caring. I was. So,
yes,
appreciate it.
Yes.
Sean could use some love this week. He is still unwell, unfortunately. The second is the new Porsche 911 Carrera T Hybrid. I love a 911, as I've made very clear on this podcast before, and this is the first ever hybrid 911 that they've done. It's on the GTS as it stands at the moment, but there is a drag race between Mark Webber and Matt Watson on CarWow, the old GTS and the new one. And the new car with its little electric motor and electric boosted turbocharger just walks away down the drag strip. It is so fast. It's almost 911 turbo fast. Yeah. So I'm staggered to see where the turbo can go from here.
I mean, that's one thing that's a concern, right? Because 911 turbo is like the pinnacle of 911, right?
Yeah.
It's before you get into like
the GTS is doing 0 to 100 in 3 seconds dead now. Yeah. So the turbo is going to have to be a 2.5 second car.
Yeah.
Which is wild for a petrol car.
That it's not far away. I mean, we know Porsche pushing to go electric with most of their models, but they keep saying 911 is going to stay petrol for a while. But I think it's going to come a time very soon where the electrified 911s are going to be the fastest ones to buy. So something to look out for. My shout out, well, I don't actually know the results yet because it hasn't happened. Because like I said, we're filming this on a Friday. But shout out to Cameron Waters and Will Brown, who raced this morning at Sonoma in NASCAR. A huge thing to have 2 Aussies on the grid there having a crack. We also had 2 Aussies in Montreal, Daniel Ricciardo and Oscar Piastri. Yay, Oscar won. Or
Damn, I can't believe Ocon took him out this week.
Yes. Whatever the results were, I think it's awesome to see some Aussies in world motorsport. There's some really exciting things happening around the world. Shaver Gisberg, oh no, he's not Aussie, but we adopted him pretty much. He had a win.
He won the race, yeah.
I mean, it's awesome. Aussies are just killing it on the world stage at the moment. And the exciting thing, Finke Desert Race is nearly here. So
yeah, it's running over this weekend.
Yes, I know, but it hasn't happened yet. So congratulations to Craig Lowndes for winning. So yes, just some really cool things happening around the world in the world of motorsport, and this is my little chance to talk about that. So that pretty much brings us to the end this week, guys. Actually, I know James has a final thought.
This week.
James, what is your final thought this week?
So I got a really cool opportunity to get an early look at the brand new BMW 1 Series recently, before it was even revealed globally. I got to look at another car, which we'll be able to talk about very soon. But so we did, I was trying to figure out what I should do with this information and what I should do with, in terms of publishing. And I did a very quick walk around of the car in a closed off studio that was very hot because of the lights. And that's relevant I'll tell you in a moment. But we posted an Instagram reel that's kind of gone viral. It's gotten 200,000 views, thousands of likes, hundreds of comments and thousands of shares. And so I didn't realize how quickly these things can sort of spread. And, it's really interesting seeing what the difference it makes when you get ahead of everyone else or getting to do it in line with the global communications. Now, the reason why I was talking about it as hot, I got a really heaps of comments about my heavy breathing during the video.
It was like you were running through a zombie film.
Yeah, if someone was like, bro, who's chasing you? You need to calm down with the breathing. And it was because it was really hot in that room and your boy was stressed. I was trying to figure out what I should do and I just was like, okay, pull the phone out, do this quick walk around. And yeah, so if you haven't seen it yet, go check out the reel on our Instagram page and it gives you a first look at the new BMW M135.
How much time do you put into cutting James's breathing noises out of the podcast?
More time than I should. But I just want to give a quick comments on what you just said. So often people, when we get a BMW, for instance, or a Mercedes or a lot of these European cars, we'll put up content on it. It's been out in Europe for months and we just don't get any traction on it. And this is one of the unique opportunities we had to actually get it almost the same time as Europe, which is really cool.
Bang on the same embargo and everything.
I think our embargo was the Australian details were 2 hours later than the European details, but it's actually really cool. And it does go to show, we are an important country for these European markets, vehicles, I think. So it's quite cool. And congratulations, James, on going viral.
Well, thank you to Paul for being absent.
Yes, you went a much better viral than Scott and I have been viral the last week too. So, Scott, any final thoughts from you?
No final thoughts, just that we're going to do some breathing exercises before the next podcast. Bit of meditation.
Yes, we're going to teach James how to edit sound. So all that to look forward to on a future episode of the CarExpert Podcast. Thank you so much, boys, for coming and joining me this week. Happy birthday again to Charlie. I hope it's a good one. Has lots of cake. And
still not his birthday.
Tea and scones. Happy Australian birthday. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.